It wasn't found by a team of scientists in white coats staring at a giant screen. It was found by a machine, alone, in the middle of the night, August 15th, 1977. While most of Ohio was sleeping, a massive radio telescope known as the Big Ear was listening. It had been scanning the sky for years, sifting through the static of the universe, hearing absolutely nothing but cosmic noise. But at 11:16 p.m., the printer started hammering out a sequence that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't random. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't a satellite. For 72 seconds, something screamed at us from the constellation Sagittarius. And then it cut off, just like that. It never happened again. When the astronomer Jerry Eman saw the data a few days later, he didn't write a paper. He didn't call the press. He just circled 6 characters in red ink. 6EQ as J5 and wrote one word in the margin. Wow. To understand why this signal terrified people, you have to understand the instrument that caught it. The Big Ear wasn't your typical sci-fi satellite dish. It was basically a massive parking lot of wire mesh, the size of 3 football fields, sitting on the ground. It didn't move. It couldn't swivel to track an object. It used the rotation of the Earth to scan the sky. As the planet turned, the telescope swept a narrow beam across the heavens. That's a crucial detail. If a source was fixed in space, like a star, the Big Ear would hear it for exactly 72 seconds. It would start quiet, peak as it hit the center of the beam, and fade out. That creates a very specific bell curve in the data, and that is exactly what the WOW signal looked like. It matched the antenna pattern perfectly. This rules advance almost every terrestrial explanation immediately. If it was a plane or a glitch, the signal would have spiked instantly or lasted too long. This didn't. It came from deep space. But it wasn't just the timing. It was the frequency, 1,420 megahertz. To a radio astronomer, that number is sacred. It's the frequency emitted by neutral hydrogen, the most common element in the universe. Decades ago, physicists Philip Morrison and Giuseppe Cocconi theorized that if intelligent aliens wanted to talk to each other across the galaxy, they'd use this channel. It's the universal water cooler. It cuts through cosmic dust. It requires very little energy, and every advanced civilization would know about it. Because of this, human authorities banned transmitting on this frequency globally. No satellites, no aircraft, no ground transmitters are allowed to touch 1,420 megahertzes. It is a protected channel specifically reserved for listening to the stars. So when the Big Ear picked up a signal right smack in the middle of that forbidden band, significantly louder than the background noise, it sent a chill down everyone's spine. Nature doesn't typically broadcast distinct, narrow band signals like that. Technology does. Let's talk about those letters Jerry circled. 6EQUJ5. The computer system used numbers 1 through 9 to represent signal intensity. But if the signal got stronger than 9, it switched to the alphabet. A is 10, B is 11, and so on. The letter U represents an intensity level of 30. That is 30 times louder than the deep space background noise. That is massive. It wasn't a whisper, it was a shout. Imagine you're in a silent library, and suddenly someone screams through a megaphone right next to your ear, and then vanishes. That's what happened. The signal rose and fell with that perfect symmetry we talked about. It implies a point source, something small and incredibly powerful, sitting very far away. Jerry Eman didn't just sit there. Once he saw the data, the team pivoted. They kept the big ear pointed at that same spot in Sagittarius for a month. They listened. They analyzed. They waited for the repeat. And this is where the story gets frustrating. Silence. Absolute silence. If this was a beacon, why turn it off? If it was a rotating lighthouse beam from a civilization sweeping the galaxy, we should have heard it again when it came back around. But we didn't. This lack of repetition is the biggest weapon skeptics use against the alien hypothesis. Science demands repeatability. You can't publish a paper on a ghost. So, people started looking for other answers. The most obvious one, a secret military spy satellite. It was the Cold War. After all, maybe the Soviets or the US military had a classified bird up there transmitting on a band frequency. But this falls apart when you look at the physics. A satellite in low Earth orbit moves fast. It wouldn't stay in the telescope's beam for 72 seconds. It would zip through in a fraction of that time. What about a geostationary satellite? Those stay put relative to the ground. But because the big ear was fixed to the ground and moving with the Earth's rotation, a geostationary satellite would appear constant. Not a perfect bell curve, rise and fall. Plus, the signal bandwidth was incredibly narrow, less than 10 kilohertz. Most military transmissions spread their signal out to avoid jamming. This looked nothing like a machine made by humans in 1977. Fast forward to 2016, Professor Antonio Paris came out with a theory that the media loved. He claimed two comets, 266P and 335P, were passing through that exact patch of sky in August 1977. We didn't know about them back then, but we do now. His idea was that these comets were surrounded by massive hydrogen clouds. Since hydrogen emits at 1,420 megahertzes, maybe the big ear just caught a comet passing by. It sounds plausible. It wraps everything up in a neat little bow, but the radio astronomy community tore this theory apart. Why? Because comets don't emit radio waves like that. If comets were that loud on the hydrogen line, we'd be blinded by them constantly. We have studied hundreds of comets. None of them produce a signal intensity of 30. Furthermore, the big ear had 2 feed horns. If a comet passed by, it should have been picked up by one horn, then the other a few minutes later. The wow signal was only heard on one. The comet theory is dead, even if the headlines didn't tell you that. Let's go back to that one horn detail because it's the smoking gun for high strangeness. The big ear used 2 receivers side by side to subtract background noise. If a signal came from the sky, it would hit the first receiver. Then about 2 minutes later, due to Earth's rotation, it would hit the second. The computer looks for this double detection. The wow signal hit receiver number 2. But it never appeared in receiver number 1. Or maybe it was the other way around. The data is ambiguous on which horn caught it. But the point is, it only happened once. If the source was a continuous broadcast from a star, it should have been seen twice, 2 minutes apart. The fact that it wasn't means the signal either turned on precisely when it entered the second beam, or it turned off precisely after leaving the first. That implies a temporal event. Someone, or something, flipped a switch. We know roughly where it came from. The constellation Sagittarius, just northwest of the globular cluster M55. But here's the kicker. There's nothing there. No nearby stars. No planets. Just empty space? Well, empty to our eyes. In 2020, an astronomer named Alberto Caballero did a deep dive into the Gaia star catalog, which maps billions of stars. He looked for sun-like stars in that specific region that we might have missed in the 70s. He found one. A star technically named 2 mass, 192819822 to 2640123. It's almost a twin of our sun. Same temperature, same radius, same luminosity. It sits about 1,800 light years away. If there is a civilization there, and they pointed a transmitter at us 1,800 years ago, we would just be getting the message now. But there is a problem with the distance. 1,800 light years is far. For a radio signal to be that strong intensity U after traveling that distance, the transmitter would need to be terrifyingly powerful. We are talking about 2.2 gigawatts or more. That is the output of a large nuclear power plant, entirely dedicated to a single radio beam. We barely have the technology to do that today. In 1977, it was unthinkable. If this was a civilization, they aren't just barely advanced. They are masters of energy. Or they were using a natural amplifier. Some speculate they could have used gravitational lensing using the gravity of a star to focus their signal like a magnifying glass, shooting it directly at Earth. So, did we say hello back? Not immediately. In 1977, we didn't have a protocol for this. We were just listening. But over the years, we've gotten bolder. In 2012, on the 35th anniversary of the WOW signal, Arecibo Observatory beamed a response. We sent 10,000 Twitter messages. Yes, Twitter messages combined with a repeating header sequence to let them know we are intelligent. We blasted it right at those coordinates in Sagittarius. It was more of a publicity stunt than a scientific endeavor. But the radio waves are real. They are traveling there now. They won't arrive for centuries. If anyone is still there to listen, they'll get a blast of 2012 human internet culture. I'm not sure if that's a good thing. This brings us to a darker possibility. Why was there no repeat? Why just one scream and then silence? There is a solution to the Fermi paradox called the dark forest theory. It suggests that the universe is full of civilizations, but they are all hiding. Because if you reveal your location, you get wiped out by a more advanced predator. Maybe the WOW signal wasn't a greeting. Maybe it was a mistake. A momentary slip-up. Someone turned on a radar they shouldn't have. Or a shield failed, leaking a burst of energy, and they realized it immediately. They shut it down. They went dark, and they prayed that no one was listening. Unfortunately for them, the big ear was listening. The WOW signal changed how we hunt for aliens. We stopped looking for messages and started looking for technosignatures. We realized that decoding a language from a completely different species is nearly impossible, but physics is universal. Propulsion systems, energy leakage, Dyson spheres, these leave footprints. The WOW signal looked like a footprint. It didn't contain complex data. It didn't stream the prime numbers or the Fibonacci sequence. It was just raw power on a specific frequency. Today, projects like Breakthrough Listen use AI to scan billions of channels simultaneously, looking for that same kind of anomaly. We haven't found another WOW. Not yet. We've had scares since then. In 2020, we picked up BLC-1, a signal coming from Proxima Centauri, our nearest neighbor. It was drifting in frequency, just like a planet's rotation would cause. The scientific community held its breath. Leaked documents suggested this was it. But after months of analysis, the heartbreak came. It was interference. A broken piece of electronics on Earth interacting with the telescope's electronics in a weird way. That's the problem with radio astronomy. We are a noisy species. Our phones, our microwaves, our GPS, we are blinding ourselves. The big ear was lucky. It operated in a time when the radio sky was much quieter. We might never get that clarity again. Jerry Amon is retired now. He spent decades answering the same question. Do you think it was aliens? He's a scientist, so he's cautious. He usually says he believes it's an open question, but he leans toward a terrestrial explanation that we just haven't figured out yet. But you can see it in his interviews, the doubt. The data was too clean, too perfect. He keeps the original printout in a safe place. I assume that piece of paper is the most valuable artifact in the history of SETI. ID is the only time in 60 years of searching that the universe picked up the phone. We may never know what happened on August 15th, 1977. The Big Ear was dismantled in 1998. The land was sold to developers. It's a golf course now. People tee off right where humanity might have made first contact. But the signal is still out there, traveling away from Earth at the speed of light. It's past hundreds of stars by now, and maybe, just maybe, the source is still watching us, waiting to see if we're smart enough to listen again. Or perhaps we missed our chance. The phone rang, we stared at it, and by the time we picked up, the line was dead. Keep looking up.